Completely unnecessary, needlessly long, and deeply uninteresting. No, I'm not talking about one of my videos, but rather Call of Duty Black Ops 6's worst level, separation anxiety. It's an issue of timing as much as anything else. The mission is one half of the big finale. It and Checkmate play out across several segments you alternate between, and so you'd expect it to be a non-stop spectacle to round out the story in suitably dramatic fashion. Checkmate does that, I suppose, although badly, whereas in separation anxiety, you spend a lot of time playing as a little girl and running around in the snow.
I'm somewhere else. I have to fix the mirror. Put the pieces back together.
I've never been a little girl myself, so can't speak to how well the experience is replicated, but if someone asked me to write a list of things I want from the last level in a Call of Duty game, that wouldn't be near the top of my list. There's nothing wrong with the idea in principle, it's one which might have worked well elsewhere in the campaign, but as part of Black Ops 6's last hour or so, it's not for me. The first two of its 3 parts also go on forever. You spend ages trudging around in the snow solving puzzles only a 5-year-old would find challenging. You spend ages running around in the dark fighting lazily reskinned zombie-like enemies only a 6-year-old would find frightening. You spend ages doing wonky platforming and fighting more pseudo-undead that no one would find entertaining. There's some intriguing exposition, far too much arguably, but because it's mixed in with a lot of dreck, staying engaged is a constant battle. Separation anxiety isn't just my least favourite portion of Black Ops 6, it might be my least favourite the series has produced in a number of years. It's testament to how abysmal separation anxiety is that my next choice, Checkmate, hasn't been chosen as the biggest stinker on this list. Your objective for the entirety of its runtime is defend house, and that is exactly as boring as it sounds. First, you fend off waves of evil organisation Pantheon's goons at the front of the Rook. They mostly run straight at you, which means even the snazzier kills you manage to pull off using the assortment of weapons and equipment available feel hollow. Then, you go and do the same thing at the rear of the house as bad guys rush you while you impatiently wait for your mortar ability to come off cooldown. Finally, you return to the front of the house to beat back enemies once again, except this time you do it slightly further down the road than you did previously. An armoured vehicle adds some trepidation, and you also have to drag Newman to safety, but it's the equivalent of adding a single chocolate chip to a bowl of gruel given how formulaic everything else is. And the mission then concludes with the showdown between Case and Harrow you've been waiting for, which plays out as a quick-time event. It's the campaign's very last slice of gameplay, and that is rubbish. What's so disappointing about Emergence is that there is definitely a fantastic experience in there somewhere. Unfortunately though, your trip to the abandoned Advanced Technologies and Applications facility is weighed down by repetition to the extent it's all extremely arduous. Emergence has the building blocks to create something brilliant. For one thing, it's chock full of references to horror and sci-fi games and films, but not too overtly. The carpets, for example, match those in The Shining's Overlook Hotel, and the soundtrack must surely be paying homage to Ennio Morricone's theme to film The Thing, such is its similarity. It has one or two genuinely unsettling moments as well, this brush with a gaggle of mannequins being the highlight, and especially early on, before things begin to drag, Emergence's atmosphere is thick with dread. Story-wise, there's some big revelations too. Thanks to environmental cues and a mysterious voice in Case's head, you find out that he was once part of the experiments undertaken there before he eventually went on a rampage. Yet, for all those good points, it's ultimately the same story as separation anxiety earlier in that it goes on about twice as long as it should have. With brevity, it could have been a tightly paced creepathon, but instead it is something more akin to the monster in aforementioned movie The Thing. It's coherent at first glance, but hides a seething mass of different forms which don't combine particularly well. You also fight lots of the Walking Dead for no discernible reason, a shameless attempt to push people towards Black Ops 6's separate zombies mode no doubt, and the bosses are truly dreadful. If you thought the armoured enemies who have become the bane of the franchise in recent years were annoying, just wait until you spend 5 minutes firing hundreds of bullets into boss monsters who do not react in the slightest. The last time I crept through city streets and found myself in a pizza place was only a few weeks ago after a big night out, and it was nice to relive that memory in Black Ops 6 without feeling like I was on the verge of vomiting. Blood Feud's early stages are a tad different in that you only pass through the pizzeria, and Case almost certainly isn't considering purposely throwing up to make himself feel better when he does, but it's broadly the same, sort of. Your goal in Blood Feud isn't to secure a low-quality late-night snack, but rather to help soon-to-be colleagues of Artie Dumar assassinate one of 4 leaders of a gang named the Guild. Sneaking your way to a church tower and the perfect vantage point is entertaining thanks to Raven's 3-lane level design, something used everywhere in the campaign, and because guards' alert phases tend to be more forgiving than they have been in the past, it's not too difficult to remain unseen. What loses the level marks for me is that after dispatching your target from a long way away, you meet up with Savati and transported to a restaurant where you essentially do exactly the same again. It's not like this part is terrible by any means, but to continue the food analogy, if I've just eaten a delicious but questionable kebab house pizza, the last thing I want is another immediately after. Highlighting these repeated segments as an issue is praise in a way too, as they only stand out due to the ridiculous variety and superb pacing present in much of the rest of the game. A shootout in a market rounds things out, but it's a by-the-numbers blast 'em up that is about as engaging as actually doing the food shop, although shooting one of the gang's leaders' cars to bits helps end things with a bang.
Limos coming down the street. Shoot!
Blood Feud is a decent second outing that doesn't do anything wrong, but equally there's nothing of note included to push it further up my list. Although Modern Warfare 3's mostly hideous open combat missions were the rightful recipients of much derision, I just knew that they'd return in Black Ops 6 regardless. What I didn't necessarily expect was for developer Raven Software's take to be a vast improvement. Where previously I'd wept tears of frustration as I tried to scavenge enough equipment to have some degree of fun while avoiding the gaze of guards who were morons 1 minute and knew exactly where I was without even seeing me the next, Hunting Season gives you more room to maneuver. You have a map with many objectives on it, and there's plenty of space between each, which makes it easier to really choose your own playstyle. Filling everyone in sight full of lead is a viable approach, as is being a tricksy little hobbit, sneaking through enemy encampments without being seen. If you take the time to explore rather than heading straight to destroy each of the 3 Scud launchers, your primary objective, you'll also build up a nice collection of equipment to use. But for all that choice, rarely is the level's gameplay anything other than adequate. Clearing out bases, destroying SAM sites and the like, you do the same thing again and again, shooting lots of blokes until no one's left standing. The most interesting moment is when you rescue a helicopter crew, Hunting Season's highlight.
That's the last of them.
Soldier, where the hell? Doesn't matter. I need you to call an airstrike. Terminal's inside the helo. Go!
This is Diesel 2-1, approaching your position. Hold out until I get there.
Beyond that though, there's nothing included that isn't executed better elsewhere in the campaign, which begs the question as to whether we needed the mission at all. If you're a fan of Ubisoft's school of design, that is, maps filled to the brim with busy work, and you're able to look past AI which isn't equipped to deal with such openness, you might still find some value. For those of you like me, who would rather eat their own hands than waste valuable gaming time indulging in senseless list ticking, what you get is the pinnacle of an experiment which need not be repeated. If length were any indication of quality, then Bishop Takes Rook would have appeared in this video sooner than now, as it's over quicker than you can say low-effort, list-based content. As I often say to my wife, however, judging anything based purely on its length is to miss so much, and in several ways the level shines. Its setting is absolutely gorgeous. In fact, the burning Kuwaiti oil fields you shoot your way through really deserved more, not only due to its beauty, but because it's the one mission which really makes it feel like you're part of the Gulf War. Yes, you later explore the sands of western Iraq and attack one of Saddam Hussein's palaces during Hunting Season and the Cradle respectively, but Bishop Takes Rook is, to me, the only occasion when the conflict is even close to fully utilised. In gameplay terms, it also serves as a hassle-free, reliable opening which introduces the basics without asking too much of you, although the helicopter set piece at the end perhaps goes a little too far in that direction. Messing it up is nigh on impossible, to the extent it's easier to complete the section than it is to deliberately fail. good looking but fairly dumb is, I think, an appropriate summation of Bishop Takes Rook as a whole. A cradle is designed to put babies to sleep, whereas Black Ops 6's The Cradle left this fully grown man full of beans and ideas for bad jokes. At first glance, there's little in The Cradle you won't have seen before. You arrive at one of Saddam Hussein's palaces by car, then proceed to push through a veritable brick wall of Iraqi soldiers. By the by, it's also bonkers how many missions begin with you speeding to your destination in a car during the campaign. It happens constantly. Anyway, once you're inside the grounds, you can choose to flank down its left or right sides, or charge directly through the palace itself. Beyond the area's excellent layout, again, all hail 3-lane level design, there wouldn't usually be much to add, except for the fact you get to use all the abilities and equipment you collected during hunting season prior. You can choose to become a chopper gunner and rain down death, drive explosive equipped RC cars around like a maniac, and many other options besides, or you can be a boring Ben and stick to simply shooting things. Whichever you choose, you'll eventually head down into a bunker and discover Pantheon's plan, then head to the roof to hold off foot soldiers and shoot helicopters out the sky.
Rooftop's clear. Jackal 1-1, you've got an enemy bird to the east. Tango's on the ground approaching your position. Copy that! Let's give them all the go!
We got a stash of weapons over here.
The Cradle is similar to Bishop Takes Rook in that it's a well-built affair which does precisely what it means to. On top of that, it has a unique selling point in the form of everything you collected beforehand carrying over, which gives it the edge over the game's opening mission. Like Saddam Hussein's golden toilet, it's something that's normally ordinary, but with a little extra shine. I originally had Under the Radar in my top 3 when I first started writing this script, but in the end I decided that would be unfair as it's very much a mission of two halves. The first is admittedly a banger. Playing as Sev, you get to explore parts of Vorkuta you first fought your way through back in 2011 during the original Black Ops. On this occasion though, it's likely you'll be using your brains rather than your brawn to get things done as you sweet talk or stealth your way towards sabotaging a SAM site, a helicopter and a radar.
Hey, fresh meat.
Gross.
Nothing personal. It's a revolving door around here.
That being said, you can revert to the tried and tested approach of shooty shooty bang bang if you want, as there is no punishment whatsoever for simply killing every soul in sight, so there's no one left to stop you. I'd personally say it takes away from some of the fun, but Call of Duty is at its core about using bullets to solve problems, so what do I know? Under the Radar's second half is made up of things you've seen many times before during Black Ops 6's campaign, and therefore isn't as close to as interesting as its predecessor. You spend more time in an attack helicopter, its effect blunted since you've already done similar several times, and you race through the base in search of Harrow indulging in standard gunplay, although the opportunity to wield a minigun for a minute or two is a welcome one. There's also a prevailing sense throughout that Vorkuta as a setting is wasted. Initial feelings of nostalgia soon subside as you realise there's no narrative reason for its inclusion, it's seemingly being thrown in only so that Raven could shout, "Hey look, do you remember this?" If Under the Radar's early stages were as good as its latter portions, then it would be tremendous. As is, it's an enjoyable affair which gets weaker the further it progresses. At last, we arrive at my top 3. I am terrified of flying, so the idea of spending time in an airport as part of a video game just isn't my bag. It conjures up feelings of impending doom for me, which only a few pre-flight Guinnesses have ever been able to solve. Ground control, on the other hand, is the second time the Call of Duty franchise has made one of my least favourite activities pleasurable, along with no Russian in the original Modern Warfare 2. Linking up with Cold War alumni Lawrence Sims, you first snipe enemies from afar while they attempt to mortar you across one of the most visually appealing burning car parks I've ever laid eyes on. Then there's a fairly long trip through the airport itself filled with pitched skirmishes, which concludes with one of my favourite parts of the game as you send enemies flying while engaged in close quarters combat on an aeroplane. Making your way across the tarmac to a waiting tank, driving it through the airport itself and shooting down a plane is also magical, and the reveal you're about to return to Vorkuta is a pretty exciting moment.
I don't know the target, but I can tell you where the weapon is.
Keep talking.
Vorkuta. Former Russian prison camp. It became a bioweapon lab years ago, before it was shut down. But it still has what they need to scale up production of the Cradle.
As mentioned, Black Ops 6 continually mixes up gameplay styles, and while I like that, I also acknowledge that many will be less enthused, which is why a few missions like ground control needed to exist. It's an excellent outing, more in the mould of what you traditionally expect from the series. Prior to playing Black Ops 6, I never thought I'd utter the phrase, "This is the closest Call of Duty has got to becoming James Bond," but thanks to High Rollers, here we are. There's no one thing which makes that so, but rather a combination of many. The opening cinematic, with its weird and wonderful visuals and espionage-tinged score, are a dead ringer for those which opened the English Super Spies movies. High Roller's casino setting is one fit for a Bond film too, and you even play a little poker as part of your mission. The whole experience also generally has a swagger about it, which is quite unlike anything seen in the series for a few games now. In recent years, it's mostly been gruff, angry military dudes getting involved in super serious stuff, and that really helps the playfulness present in this level shine.
Here you are. Enjoy. Danke.
On the entry. Cards in hand, heading downstairs. Hey! Here, I'm taking my break.
Even with High Rollers being so wonderfully light-hearted though, I did struggle with where I should place it, not because it commits any great sins, but rather because it is a cleverly disguised repeat of an earlier level. It begins with a section spent wandering around the safe space, then there's some stealth, and that's followed by a big firefight, which eventually leads to you having to push your way back through the area you started in. We haven't reached the mission which does that first yet, but we will momentarily. What ultimately proved to be enough to give High Rollers the silver medal is that I remember playing through it for the first time and having a huge smile on my face from beginning to end. If you're not a fan of Bond, James Bond, then perhaps you'll be shaken rather than stirred by your trip to the casino, but many more, I'd guess, will be in 00 heaven. I said during my recent extremely detailed critique of Black Ops 6's campaign, click the card on screen now to check it out, that Most Wanted is the game's best mission, and I haven't changed my opinion. After Bishop takes Rook and Blood Feud, a pair of good but not great escapades, I started to wonder whether Raven even had any surprises up their sleeve, and then Most Wanted arrived in the nick of time to quell any concerns I might have had. Bill Clinton's super fun Washington DC shindig, as I prefer to call it, begins with you entering the Capitol building as a photographer, and you then have to secure the retinal scan of one Senator McKenna so you can enter the black site hidden below the building. There are 3 ways of getting what you need. You can help the Senator's wife prevent a blackmail attempt, you can join forces with a mob boss, or you can go straight for McKenna himself through one of his associates. Each opportunity is marked on your map and involves a few conversations and some simple stealth, and they feel very much like a lighter version of those found in a Hitman game.
The Senator isn't giving interviews tonight, and he doesn't go anywhere without his security detail. So the easy option is off the menu. Here, take this. I've done some scouting. Marked a few leads that could help get him isolated and get you close enough to do the retinal scan. Take your pick.
It's a slow-paced but intriguing start which blossoms into a much more mechanically complex affair the further you progress. This is where the High Rollers comparison I alluded to becomes apparent. There's stealth on the roof and stealth in the black site, you drive a drone around before you rescue Adler and then have to escape by clearing a path through the party you previously visited with hot lead. It's a dead ringer for your casino adventure, although in fairness Most Wanted comes first, and it also finishes with a motorcycle set piece, the likes of which its pseudo-sequel lacks. What I love more than anything, though, is how that variety is combined with continual increases in complexity. Events build and build and build, with every minute feeling more energetic than the last. Most Wanted will probably clock in close to an hour during your first playthrough, a long time by Call of Duty standards, but you won't notice it due to Raven's incredible craftsmanship. And with that, we reach the end of my list ranking Call of Duty Black Ops 6's levels from worst to best. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and operatives. If it tops your list of vaguely interesting things you've seen on YouTube today, do consider liking, subscribing and sharing your ranking. And all's well, we'll hang out again soon.